this programme we're thinking about ecology. Renowned Brazilian theologian Leonardo Boff speaks with Mark Hathaway of the Jesuit Forum USA on the key themes arising from Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. Boff argues that the ecological crisis is at its heart a crisis of relationships. This discussion was recorded in May 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic, and you can find versions in English, French and Spanish. We then meet climate change public policy analyst and researcher from the USA, Mary Venner.
Sunday morning at Cowichan Bay. Among silken driftwood pews, I find my place, as distant gulls herald a summons to prayer. From the mosaic at my feet, I pluck a stone, polished by the pull of the moon, smooth as a rosary bead. Mist rises like incense to reveal a sea teeming with light. Two black-tailed deer emerge from the woods and bow in tandem for a taste of salt at low tide. In this sanctuary, I have no need of preachers, gilded vaults, only solitude, indigo mountains, and sky.
It's a great pleasure for me to welcome Leonardo Boff. He is not only a great theologian and philosopher, but he is a person with a very deep understanding and a great heart, and as well as a good sense of humor, and he's very much in sympathy with the marginated and Mother Earth. I think you bring the intellect and the heart together in a very special way. So it's always a pleasure to be with Leonardo. Together we wrote a book on liberation, as Ana Maria mentioned. And today I would like to reflect on a number of subjects. It's the 5th anniversary of the encyclical. There are always many influences in an encyclical, but it's obvious what kind of influence Leonardo had. He's one of the we hear very much about the cry of the earth and of the poor, and it's a line that comes from Leonardo in his book, the Ecology, cry of the poor, cry of the earth. Welcome, Leonardo, and I would like to begin with the theme of the economic crisis. It says here that the ecological crisis is an external manifestation of the ethical, cultural, and spirituality crisis of modernity. It's interesting. It says, I think that it's a concrete manifestation, and what I would like to start by asking is, how should is this really an environmental crisis, or is it more an ecological crisis? What is ecological crisis? And how can we have an ecological crisis as a crisis in relationships in the universe. But before all, I would like to say hello to everyone, especially to my friend Mark, and also I'd like to thank Anna and Maria for her words, and I would like to thank Isabel and Scott who are interpreting and others who are accompanying us. I'd like to thank all of you through these digital media. We are now members of a common home, and we can communicate. To answer your question, Mark, I believe that we're in a systemic crisis. What I mean is it includes all the different dimensions: environmental, social, economic, ethical, spiritual. The way that we have built society and lived in this common house, we can't continue to like this, because what we're doing is so destructive, and it's affecting the physical and chemical bases that sustain life. And as a result of this, the Pope wrote Laudato Si, whose real title is in the subtitle, on caring for the common house, how we take care of our common house. If we have to do it, or if we're going to be in an even more difficult situation. Now, from the perspective of the Pope, it's not just a green encyclical of restoring ecology, but what he's calling for is integral ecology that includes the environment, society, politics, culture, everyday life, and the spiritual dimension of human beings. So when we talk about ecology, we refer to a new paradigm, a new ideas, dreams, and perspectives that are at the roots of a different way of relating to the earth, to nature, and so that we can guarantee a future for our civilization. Because in the present situation, we can't continue along the same way. We've reached the limitations of the earth. We can't go any farther. In his encyclical, the Pope says that it is completely false to say that there are unlimited services and goods and services in the earth that would allow for unlimited growth. The Pope says that that is a lie. The earth is a small planet. It's an old planet. It has limited resources, and it cannot tolerate an unlimited plan. 35 times he says that we have to change the ways of living, the way that we produce and distribute, the way that we consume. We really have to revise our ways and start again, as the Earth Charter says. I think that ecology, but what is the reasoning behind the common house? What is the reasoning behind our home? That wisdom that shows us what the planet is. There's an interrelationship and a connection in this reasoning. I don't like that idea of the environmental terminology, because if we talk about just the environment, it's as though we're talking about something that's outside of us. But it's important to emphasize that we're part of the earth, air, and we're connected with this huge web of life. I like very much Windowberg, the U.S. philosopher. His name is Windowberg. The world that surrounds us and exists in all of us is also within us. We are made of it. We eat, we drink, and we breathe the earth. It's bones of our bones and flesh of our flesh. And in the crisis that we're experiencing, we see this idea of being separated instead of being connected, of not understanding, not only not understanding, but without really feeling that connection and experiencing this connection. We're so disconnected from other people, we're disconnected from the people that we know best, but we're also disconnected from nature. I don't know. Would you have any comment about this? That the crisis is also an opportunity. How should we understand this idea of a crisis? Mark, I think that you touched on something that's very central for me. What is our relationship with Earth and nature? It's a relationship. It's not an issue of belonging. It's not as though the nature's out there and I'm here. We belong to nature. We're part of it. Perhaps the most mindful, the most ethic, but we're one whole with humanity. The astronauts have said this very clearly. They saw the Earth from the moon, from their spaceships, and they say that from up here there's no difference between the Earth and humanity. It's just one thing. Earth and humanity is one complex unit, and we're just part of that nature. I'd say more than that. We're that part of the Earth that in one time of its complexity began to feel, to think, to love, and to take care. And that's how the human being emerged. And they're the omen that comes from humus, good earth. We are earth that thinks, that feels, and that loves. But all of that was forgotten. It existed in all ancient cultures. They understood the earth as a great mother, Pachamama, Mother, Nana, all of those terms, something that was alive, from which we receive everything. But starting in the 16th century with Descartes and Francis Bacon, they said, no, Earth is just an object without any purpose. And Francis Bacon says things that are worse than that. He says that we have to torture nature and Earth as though we were in the Inquisition, and to torch the victim until it gives us all its secrets. That method created a violent civilization, and it continues until today. It's not a relationship of caring or love. It's something that is part of it. It's if someone who's outside with a closed fist that wants to dominate. And that has created the sciences and technical aspects. It's created this great development, but at the same time, it's created the principle of self-destruction, as Carl Sagan said. we've created a series of lethal instruments that can put an end to all life on the planet. So on one side, where we have lots of made things very easily for us, but at the same time we can destroy ourselves. So therefore, the ecological discourse is so essential. We have to organize ourselves in a different way, and so that we don't run the risk of destroying ourselves. What you were saying about humus, it's also in the Genesis in Hebrew. In Adam, which means human, comes from Adamah. According to the Bible as well, we're creatures of the earth, literally. That's written in Hebrew with regard to the crisis with the pandemic that we have now. We have to look at the interconnection between the ecological crisis, or rather, many people talk about an environmental crisis, but it's a crisis of creation and the human crisis as they're intertwined. We know that this pandemic, like many others, began with deforestation or the destruction. As humans are expanding and taking all more territory, we see it with globalization, and everything is in communion, and how things can be spread so quickly. So the interconnection between the crisis, some people would call that a crisis in science, and others would say that it's environmental. But with this interesting word, apocalypsis, are we looking at an apocalyptical event? Apocalypse means a revelation. It becomes more inequalities, suffering, and the connections with the suffering of the creation and human creation. All of that becomes more obvious. Mark, what I think is that there are two main causes that have caused many viruses, Zika, SARS, and many others that we've experienced. And there are really two reasons for that, I think. First of all, urbanization of the world. 33% of humans live in cities, and they don't even know what nature is. They've come too close together. There's been deforestation, all the different spaces have been taken over. That's one thing. The other thing is business has moved out on top of forests. It's a horrible situation in Amazonia. Those places where millions and millions of bacteria and viruses live, they felt that they were aggressive, and they looked for a new habitat in humans because we destroyed their habitat. They were living calmly for millions of years in their habitats, but we've destroyed their habitats, and they have moved into the human being to live in themselves. That's one thing. Another aspect that I would like to underscore, if we say that what was a hypothesis before, since 2002, there was a large conference with over 3,000 scientists in Level and their group. They agreed that the hypothesis the Gaia hypothesis, which says that the Earth is a living superorganism. It's become a scientific fact that articulates chemistry, physics, and cosmic and to reproduce life. It's life itself, and that's why it produces life. So if the Earth is Gaia, is life, and we have aggressed it for centuries, and Pope Francis said that never in our history have we harmed our common house as we have over the last 2 centuries. So the Earth is living, we've attacked it, and now it's reacting. It's attacking us. We started a war with the Earth, and the Earth is responding with its own weapons, which are invisible, and we can't defend ourselves. They're putting us on our knees. We can have hundreds of missiles that are completely useless. So the solution doesn't just come from medicine or different techniques, even though we need them to discover a vaccination. And all those things are very important. But the solution for the future, and if there's a solution before as well, is to redefine a new relationship with nature and with the Earth, a relationship that is not aggressive or destructive, that loves life. We have to feel that we're part of that life. We have to accept the ethical imperative that we were put in the Garden of Eden to be the stewards, to care for that sacred earth. But we haven't taken care of it. The great biologist, E.O. Wilson, said that we have become the devil of the earth that kills. We've created, invented, and started a new geological area, the Anthropocene, the era of the Ecocene, I would say, of death, because human beings are the great threat. We have to go beyond the threats, and we can do it if we establish a different kind of connection and more friendly relationship with life. I think that we can move on to integral ecology because we saw this virus. Unfortunately, very often those who did the least to create the problem are the ones who suffered most. We know that the poor will suffer more from this virus. They were certainly the ones who had the least to do with ecological destruction, but climate change, even much more, is a crisis that doesn't affect everything the same way. We have to look for integral solutions that take into account the interrelations of social and the natural world, and these things aren't separated. It's social, environmental they're talking about, but we would perhaps say ecological. We should understand all these interconnections, social, environmental, economic, but also spiritual interconnection and the cultural interconnections. Leonardo, this is a subject that we've worked together on for many years. So how do you understand the integral ecology and what does it imply? The first thing is to recognize our mistakes. Churches, religions are not the solution. They're part of the crisis because they strengthen the idea of the human being as the master of nature who can plunder it however he wants, instead of developing the awareness of collective responsibility of our common house. I like that idea that's also in the Earth Charter, our living common house. I like that expression. In our house, we have everything that we need to live. So the house is not only the one where we live or the city where we're located, it's the planet and its whole, its nature with its different ecosystems, and all of them together make up our common home. I think that everything can be summarized, and I think this is the essential point to define what kind of relationship we will have between Earth and humanity. We can't correct what we've done badly, but we have to do reforesting and have pure air and water and save what's been harmed and prevent further damage to nature and create conditions so that all life forms, because biodiversity has been seriously attacked. 10 species of living beings disappear forever because of the voracity of the capital system, the idea of consuming material goods without respecting the intrinsic value of each being, thinking that things have value only if they're useful for us. No, things have they have value whether or not humans can use them. We live too far from all of that. In the Earth Charter, the Pope said that we have to have a radical ecological conversion. We have to change. We have to start inside ourselves and not expecting the great dawn when things will change. Everyone has to begin to change himself or herself. How you treat water, how you deal with your garbage and your words, so that you don't offend other people, so that you don't break down communication bridges. A tremendous problem is how we can overcome the immense inequality that exists in humanity. Humanity that suffers along with the earth. Therefore, the Pope says that we have to listen at the same time the cry of the earth that has been crucified and the cry of the poor, the great majority of those who live in this world. That is the real situation that we have to overcome. And if we don't overcome it, we're going to have a very dramatic situation. Ecology was just a subchapter in biology before. It wasn't very important, but as soon as we realized, starting with the Club of Rome, that the earth was sick and the cause was the destructive kind of development that we cause, ecology moved outside the university, moved into the streets, and became a political problem, a general concern of humanity. Or we save lives, or we can run tremendous risks. I believe that ecology is the logic of the common house and reciprocity, connectiveness, etc. But we're also looking at another kind of reason, which is called pathology, the logic of suffering. It's the logic, it has many different names, domination, colonialism, patriarchal, anthropocentrism, extractivism. All those are interconnected. They're all a little different, but they all come from that same kind of dominating, of trying to be above other things, thinking that some are better than others. It's the opposite of caring, sharing, of reciprocity. The same ideologies or the same pathologies, the same kinds of reasoning of suffering that are causing human poverty and the suffering of the entire earth. We have a need for the common house reasoning. It has to do with regeneration. We have to become a part of the intelligence of the earth and cooperate and be allies with the earth and regenerate ecosystems and other kinds of culture to have healthy food and give life to people. If I have a small criticism of Laudato Si, I think that it criticizes anthropocentrism. It calls it despotic and but I think that we're a little bit different, as if we're strange beings, and it's as if we're dangerous, but at the same time we have many different abilities and capacities. And those are two different dimensions, but anthropocentrism is the concept that other beings are only important if they're useful to us. It's not it's only if they're pretty or whatever, or they're useful. That's their value, and that's part of the pathology of domination. But what's nice in Laudato Si is that it's against all this anthropocentrism. But there's another kind of anthropocentrism. Instead of the intrinsic value, and the fact that every creature has a function, and so that has nothing to do with the usefulness for us. But as human beings, we're not just something we can throw out. We all have value. The radical ecological conversion, how can we enter into caring and love and leave behind the theology of domination? Mark, I like very much what you're saying. You're talking about the wisdom of the earth. As a mother, the earth has a great deal of wisdom, and it brings together all of us. It's created many daughters and sons, not only human beings. The Earth Charter doesn't talk much about the environment, first of all, because we want to bring the entire everything together. We talk about a living community, all being brothers and sisters. All of us have the same origin in the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. And the Earth has an advanced time in cosmogenesis, which created the universe. And there's a great deal of wisdom in the Earth. The first thing is diversity of all the children. The people of minerals, of forests, of animals, the people of human beings, spiritual beings, like the indigenous thing. They talk about the people of the forest. And at the same time, they created a connection among everything. There's a relationship among all things. It's the basic principle of quantum physics of Heisenberg and others who say that everything is related. Nothing exists outside of the relationship. The universe is not the sum of all the existing beings. It's a whole of all the webs and connections, and we're all part of these webs and connections. Therefore, we say that we're all united, creating that huge complexity. The other category is the complexity and mutuality. We complement each other, we help each other, even the weakest being. And this goes against social Darwinism. That being has a reason to make. There's a word that was written by God on creation. If someone is weak, we have to help him so that he can evolve and continue to be with us. And the human being has a role in solidarity to play. We're connected. That means that we all cooperate. And here, what I see is the tremendous contradiction. We have to say what it's called, the great contradiction of the capitalist system that dominates the world, even in China. And it's absolutely competitive. Without solidarity, without cooperation. It exploits human labor, sciences, and collective wisdom. It exploits nature, the accumulation of material goods on an individual basis without consideration of the others. That goes against the reasoning of nature. It's anti-life, and so the Pope said many times that it is a killing system because it produces two kinds of injustice: social injustice, with a few wealthy with millions of poor, and an ecological poverty, which destroys ecological relationships and ecosystems and harms relationships that are natural among all beings. It even exploits the last limitations of nature. Those two injustices are at the roots of our kind of civilization. I think that this society is even in a crisis that I would call terminal. We can't move forward like that. The earth can't support that anymore. In April, there was there's the day of overshooting, the day in which the goods and services of the earth have been exhausted, and we continue to exploit. And so we get warmer temperatures, more soil erosion, less water, more destruction of the crops. That's the way the earth reacts to this real war that we are causing against the earth on different fronts, in water, in soil, and air, everywhere. We have no chance of winning that war because the earth doesn't need us. We do need the earth. The earth can continue to evolve without us. Therefore, we have a responsibility. Therefore, the ecological factor is so important, and every person has to assume this responsibility. Nations and different people have to protect in different ways life. It's the most precious thing that we have. It's the greatest gift of God. We have to maintain the conditions with enough water, with nutrients, We need warmth. We have to have pure air for us and for future generations. I think what you've said is very important in taking into account when we think about the overshooting to reach in the month of April. In reality, it's just a small minority in humanity that's responsible. 10 or 20% of the most wealthy that consume about 80%, and that create most of the effects of, and it's just a few transnational companies that are responsible for a great deal of the greenhouse gases in life. So, and this, who are benefiting, those who are benefiting are the ones who suffer the consequences, much whereas the poor and the other members of creation suffer more. There's a graph that I like to look at and explains capitalism. It's a huge machine, and all of life is funneled into it to produce money, but money has no value in itself. It's a symbol. What we see that there's a great concentration of wealth in very few hands. Jeff Bezos, it seems, we say, he would soon have a trillion millions of dollars. $1 trillion. It's pathological. In talking about ecological conversion, I like the Greek word metanoia. It means a change in heart. It's a very important intuitive word. Antonio Damasio, a neurologist who's studied how we make decisions through our emotions. If we destroy the centers that have to deal with emotions, we can't make decisions. A change in decision has to do with emotionality of emotions, and more than anything else, it's not through fear. We try to motivate people with fear. Sometimes it can work on a short-term basis, but fear causes separation. I think that you've worked on this a great deal. The idea of caring, Leonardo, the feeling of connection and feeling empathy with other beings and other people that will allow us to make change. This perception, this emotional perception has to be there. Analysis is a part of all that. There's nothing wrong with analysis, but without a heart, an analysis doesn't lead us to change. So how can we learn to listen to the voice of the earth and to other creatures, the voice of the marginalized? How can we listen, and how can we be allowed to be transformed? How can we feel compassion and connection so that we can produce change? Perhaps we're talking about ecological spirituality. How can we put it into practice? Mark, you've touched on something that's essential, I think, to change, to understand ecology, because we have intellectual intelligence, rational intelligence, but that's existed for 8 to 10 million years. But the intelligence of the heart has existed. It's existed for 220 million years. When it's come from the time when we were mammals. The human being is a mammal. We've forgotten that. And when love and caring and protection came from these mammals, emotional intelligence, and there's another kind of intelligence that we'll talk about later, spiritual intelligence. But what you said is correct. If we don't have compassion, if we don't have feelings and passion, pathos, so that we can feel the suffering of and the call of the children who are calling for bread and the children who are dying, abandoned. It's our heart that moves it. It's the place where love and empathy comes from. And that's what moves us. Our passions and ethical values are there. If I see someone who's dead, my intelligence, I can see, then I can call for a photographer and a journalist and say, here's someone who's dead. But if you said, that dead person is my brother, everything changes. It moves us from the head to the heart. That's where love and caring come from. That's what we need. We've created a kind of lobotomy. Human beings have been insensitive, without pity, cruel, with regard to those who are suffering and to the earth that has been crucified. The desertification of the world, the great deforestation, the elimination of thousands of living species. If we do not have or develop that feeling in our heart, we're not going to move forward. So, yes, we do need intellectual reasoning because society is so complex that we have to have science and technology so that we realize what the needs of humans are. But we have to enrich that intelligence with an emotional intelligence so that we can become more sensitive, more careful, and more human. We need others. We need to feel that our neighbors are our brothers and sisters and that we're part of a huge family in this common house. So we have a huge head and a very small heart. I wrote a book, The Rights of the Heart. It's in Spanish. Saving the heart's intelligence. If we don't have that intelligence, we're going to have trouble saving the earth. That's why in his encyclical, the Pope said that when we look at the statistics, we have to see them with compassion, with feeling, because behind the numbers, there are people who are suffering. There are human beings and animals and forests that are suffering as well. And we have to feel their suffering as our own. Compassion. You understand this better than I. The great personal virtue of Buddha is to feel alone with others, not to save, not to allow that suffering to remain alone. Suffering isn't the word, it's being alone in the suffering. When no one comes to you, no one stretches out a hand, no one puts a hand on your shoulder, no one encourages you. We need words of love, of caring, and kindness with nature and the earth, the cosmos. And that will allow us to help to save this beautiful reality that we have inherited from for centuries. We've been given a garden that is the earth. It's very interesting to hear that the neurologists that we have neurons as what do they call mirror neurons. When with empathy when someone feels suffering or pain, and you're accompanying that person, and you feel that the same parts of the brain are lighting up, and some way we have that ability to feel this pain or the happiness of others. Perhaps elephants and other mammals may have that, but we, some human beings, have this capacity. Perhaps this possibility is more developed in human beings. This is a very special capacity. We can suffer, feel joy among ourselves. One of the things that I like a lot is the gospel of creation. In all creation, there's a revelation of God. There's a beautiful book about the multitude of creatures present in the universe, and there are saints like Saint Bernard said that the trees and stones will teach you what you could never have learned from masters. Another mystic said that each creature is full of God, and is a book on God. This idea of being able, finding the Creator in creation, feeling the presence of God, feeling. It's interesting because when we look at Jesus' practice, it seems that it's something, he's constantly outdoors. He goes to the out into the nature, into the wilderness, but we feel this connection with other beings and with other human beings. Some of my students, I worked with them in a non-religious context, but we went to parks and we tried to listen to what a tree or an insect is communicating. We meet with another being and let this being teach us as a master. It's incredible. The ideas that come out of that, they're very deep and very beautiful, and people feel a strong desire after doing this kind of thing. We talk about this in the invocation, of beginning the practice of gratitude, of awe, of connection. But we also have to let ourselves go, the things that we have to leave behind, but we have to enter into the suffering of the world, as Joanna Macy says, and leave behind our old habits, work on the creativity or the vision of new ways of being. People who work with permaculture or try to work with other ways of showing that there's a new kind of economy, living in the earth is possible, and to recover all the indigenous wisdom that still exists. The transformation of action in many different forms, not only protests, but a change in awareness, and to put all of that into practice. How can we live this ecological spirituality and a conversion that's deeper and deeper? I would like to say two things, Mark. First of all, this idea that you brought up, the book of creation. It's an old and traditional doctrine of theology. It was there with Saint Augustine and with the moderns, Guardini and others, that the first book that God wrote is nature. In Romans 8, it says that God is revealed in in the majesty of nature. There's this feeling of magnificence. I have flown over the Amazon forest. It's impressive to see all the different rivers. You have the feeling of magnificence, of revelation. But things are more than things. It's the capacity of the human being to understand messages that come from things. Beauty, magnitude, or the magnitude of diversity, especially from flowers, from forests. Every being has its distinctiveness. And if we have eyes, we can begin to enjoy that distinctiveness and beauty. It's in the first book because we were savage and we destroyed that book. And God, in His mercy and pity, gave us a different book, which are the sacred scripture. And reading the scriptures, we can read again the first book. But we shouldn't do like the same thing that fundamentalists do. You have to put the scriptures behind your head to illuminate the world, not in front of you, just to look at texts. These things weren't written to be things. They were written to enlighten. We have to unite with this first book so that we can move on and read the second, so that we have a greater revelation of God through His words. I think that we have to bring that back in our talks. In our book, Tower of Liberation, we have worked on that. And the second point that I wanted to mention, Mark, is what you said about spirituality. We shouldn't confuse spirituality with religions. Spirituality came before. It's the experience of what is deeply inside us. We have things outside our body, we enter into contact with the others, the energy of the earth, etc. But we also have our inner world, our desires, our passions, the devils that we have inside us, the psychologists that help us to balance all of that so that we can be more or less balanced, so we're not totally neurotic. That's our interior. And that is the deepness in interiority. That's where spirituality lives, where we find the important subject. Who put those beautiful stars in the sky? Where do I come from? Why was I born in this country with this mother tongue? Why am I here? When I feel that I've been betrayed by a friend, why do I cry? What can I expect after this life that I love? But death waits me. It's not the end of life. It's a transition and a transfiguration of life. We present this important question: what are the forces? And you wrote about this very well, and you know this subject better than I in the book. So what's this energy that comes from below and it sustains everything that is present now and that maintains this dialogue? It's in deep energy that has the characteristics that religions have given to divinities, the things that are mysterious, infinite, that have no limits, an ocean of pure energy. That's where we came from. We were just a small little dot, but that continues to sustain everything, including what we're talking about right now. That's a profound part of human being. Those are the values we're talking about, the spiritual one, intangible values, solidarity, love, compassion, what we call, what we, the energy that sustains us all and that exists within us. Someone called halal, hedea, foul. We call it God, our Father, Jesus Christ. That reality is an anthropological fact. This spirituality, this experience came from religions. So to reach spirituality, we have to go from the head to the heart. The head says that God is the Father, He creates everything, but when that goes into the heart, we understand what Father means symbolically, the person who sustains me, who protects me, and stretches out his hand to accompany like a good father or mother. That's spirituality. And another thing, something that you mentioned is neuroscientists call the God point in the brain. The theologians didn't invent that, nor the neurologists are very advanced inside, and they say that human beings always deal with the issues of the meaning of the world and what sacred God means. In the frontal lobe, there's an acceleration. What are they called? From the neurons, an acceleration of the neurons. Normally they're at 9.7% of activity, and they go up to 30%. That's the God point. That means that within us, we have an organ, which is our evolutionary advantage to understand what God is in nature and in our heart. And that allows us to open up to that reality. And that reality, and a book that you're familiar with, in quantum physics, written by Ganadzua, a Brit who lives in the US, he talks about intellectual intelligence. The God point is an organ, the same way you see outside organs, eyes to see, ears to listen, our mouth to speak. We also have an internal organ to be able to hear God. She works with her husband, who's a neurologist, but unfortunately, is that God point has been covered with egotism, materialism, and it has to be cleaned so that it can shine, so that this God point can make us more sensitive, more careful, so that we can reverence what's sacred in creation and the people. That God point is something scientific, and it supports the experiences of humanity. We've always worked with that dimension. In the deepest part of us, there's a creator who accompanies us and is the omega point that attracts us. In the language of the Chown, in the language, we continue to grow until we implode and explode within God, in the heart of God. That is spirituality. It makes us more human, more sensitive, more generous. And that is what we need the most in this world. We're too materialistic. We have to arrive at another kind of humanism, humanity, another kind of intangible and human and spiritual values that come from our heart, from the depths of which the presence of God lives. Thank you, Leonardo. I know we're going to have questions in a few minutes, so I'd like to do two things before we go to the question. First of all, another interesting thing here is the word spirit in different, it's in the air, it's the breath in many languages. And that's the breath that connects us with all beings physically. We see it in plants, we're breathing the same air. It's the feeling of connection. And when we talk about the spirit, we're talking about breath and air at the same time. Sometimes we forget the physical aspect and we look at something that's not very concrete. The second thing I'd like to say, talk about, is the idea of where values come from. Ardenas, a philosopher and ecologist, says that we have to broaden our understanding of what being means. It's this feeling that the ethics or morality aren't that important, but how do we feel life? How do we experience life? How are with empathy? Ethica comes from the inside. It's the interpretation of law and grace. Law is external, but grace comes from inside us. It comes from this feeling of connection and spirituality, and therefore it's so basic, so fundamental. Victoria will be asking questions because I know the time is moving forward, and I'm sure that there will be questions that have come up. Victoria. Hello. Thank you, Leonardo, for that very interesting presentation. We have time for a few questions. First one is, what is the future of the artificial system that has been imposed on us if we live in a capitalist society and structure in a system that is structurally unjust? How can we propose alternative ways of living? That's the challenge of our generation. It's a very significant challenge because we live in the culture of capital and we're all hostages. We have to change our cell phone, we need a new computer, we have to need new clothes and consume more and more. How can we go beyond that? I think that we have a clear understanding that we are living in a planet in which we have to consume in a responsible and sober fashion. There are almost 8 billion. There'll be about 8 million, and will be 10 million by 2050. And we don't know if Earth will be able to nourish all those people. So we need a molecular revolution, starting from ourselves, to treat water and garbage and people well, and create a revolution within ourselves, reinvent humanity, starting with ourselves, starting with the way that we're related to things, to be awestruck by nature, by a sunset. Jorge Soler cuenta that he went to see a sunset near Rome, and the son asked, "How much will that cost?" everything is a piece of merchandise. They can't appreciate things in themselves. Things have to change. Our mind has to change. We have to feel part of nature. If our heart has to change, we have to feel that we're part of the rest and feel that connection that's permanent with all of us and nourish collective responsibility. Responsibility means that my actions that have consequences, negative or positive, for other people, and everything that I do correctly. Quantum physics said, if I do something, if I have good energy, it's distributed and will strengthen other positive energies until it creates a tsunami of positivity. It will allow us to make a quantum leap into a more human society with more respect, where everyone is allowed, including nature. It's an issue of changing our dreams. We talked about our dream of the earth. We have the illusion that consuming is going to move us toward happiness, but it's not true. Yes, we do need to have enough. But more consumerism doesn't bring us more joy. It's as if we were constantly unsatisfied. It's the contrary of good living and having just enough. When you were talking about the spell of nature, the enchantment, we have to be enchanted by the beauty of the world. And Panikar said that we have to open ourselves and let ourselves be influenced by the spell of the earth. And we have to say that other ways of living are possible, and trying to experiment with regenerative ways of living with, even though it's on a small scale, it provides us with a vision that another world is possible, and it would give us a great deal more joy to live in that kind of world and not in the kind of world where we live today. Thank you very much. The second question: in Canada and many parts of the world, our politicians have respected Bolsonaro as a leader, whereas they attack other leaders like Evo Morales and Nicolás Maduro in our political and social world. What can we do in Canada to express our solidarity with the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor throughout the world? That's a significant challenge. I'd like to thank and recognize the hospitality that Canada has always had, especially we were living under the extremely repressive military dictatorship in Brazil. Many Brazilians found refuge in Canada. They studied there and then they came back to Brazil. It was always, Canada was always in a very open country, and two sons of my my companion, studied in Vancouver, and there's a much more developed sense of ecology in Canada than in other countries. The way that they treat indigenous as the original owners of the country. Here we're killing them. And 45 have been killed during the pandemic. They're having to escape from the reserves and from their land. I think that we're at a time in which change has become urgent. I've been reading many texts and I've been thinking a lot. What will happen? What will happen later? Human beings, will they learn or will they go back to different opinions? There are many economists and others who say that we're going to go back to the previous situation, but it's a worse situation, a kind of dictatorship and world totalitarianism that uses trying to follow every person with computers in society to try to dominate the world with small groups until everything explodes. So we're moving toward a dramatic kind of situation. And I would like to remind you of the thinking of a great thinker who died a while ago, Bowman. He said, either we change and live in a different way in nature, or we're going to become part of those who are destroying themselves and moving into their own grave. We have to learn a lesson. It will be very difficult, that we can't continue in that because the earth will send other viruses our way. And there's a danger mentioned by many, just to say the next big one, the next great virus or bacteria that will be invincible and could destroy the human species. It's not impossible. It's up to us to take care of man, not just to put a band-aid on its wounds, but to take care of its bleeding, its breathing, and its life. We have the chance to learn, to make changes, because if not, we have no future. I think that humanity will have to learn from that, and it will realize that there's an economic, ecological, psychological crisis. There'll be unemployment, psychological problems. We have to change our ways of producing and consuming. And I think that that's part of human possibilities. It depends on how we put that all together. If we can create a world social pact or agreement that we don't have, we face this pandemic and everyone is working by themselves, but we have to confront world problems together on a global level. We need a democratic and pluralistic centers of power. It doesn't only look at goods and services that we have to destroy. We have to be socialist, not through ideologies. We have to distribute to other human beings, and we have to be more democratic and socialize ourselves. I think it's the only possibility that will guarantee a future for our civilization. I would like to add from Canada that I recognize that Canada also has many limitations, especially with its extractivism. Many of these large mining companies are Canadian, unfortunately. Next week, we're going to have another virtual seminar on women and the extractive industry. I'm just giving you a little propaganda here, but I think what we need is a participatory democracy. It's been very difficult to reach that so far. I think that in Latin America, there were certain interesting experiments with interesting governments. Lula's government did a lot of good, even though it had imperfections, and even things moved forward with Evo Morales in Bolivia, but there were certain kinds of leadership there that were not completely what would be described in participatory democracy. I think the leadership of women is very important. In Uruguay, Mojica was an interesting example of another kind of more humble leadership, someone who wanted to provide service. It's the kind of thing that we could see also in New Zealand, but there are very few leaderships that are dedicated to service and humility and service to the land. But I think that's the kind of policy that we need perhaps more and more with the present situation. A few days ago, I read an article from one of the greatest specialists on poverty and inequality. Jeffrey Sachs is his name. He said that we now have the opportunity to reduce inequalities and create ecological and human equality, reduce ecological and human inequality, and create a Pacific situation. So I think that life is said that God created all things with love, and He is passionate and someone who loves life. So I think this is a God who has passion, love for life, is not going to allow that our lives come to an end so miserably. He's going to give us intelligence. He's going to articulate ourselves so that we can save each other. Because this time, there's no ark that's going to save everyone. Or we all are saved, or we all die, and it's the risk is global. As a German writer said, when the danger is greater, the chance of salvation is also greater.
When I was young, you woke me with the sound of song. The wind and rhythm drew me along. I echoed in the hymn of the dawn. I turned and turned, this dance that all the planets learn, in circles round the stars as they burn. I praise you as I orbit and turn, declaring glory, glory, declaring glory, glory. Like me, they have your spirit within, but soon they fade away as I spin. They fall to dust and dress me in decay and rust. Their secrets buried deep in my crust. I praise you in the layers of dust, declaring glory, glory, declaring glory, glory. The rocks wear down beneath the passing of the clouds. The rivers run until they run out. I'll praise you till my fires run out. I'll praise you till my fires run out. I'll praise you till my fires run out. I'll praise my Maker in every age. I'll praise my Maker in every age. I'll praise my Maker in every age. I'll praise my Maker in every age.
In the past year alone, 80% of the world has experienced extreme heating. The human body can only tolerate so much heat and cannot adapt. Here, Mary Venner reminds us that one of the main tenets of Catholic social teaching is the universal destination of goods. It affirms the stewardship of the earth for all people.
I want to welcome you, Marie. Thank you so much for being available today and to share with us your deep knowledge and the research and the work that you've done over the years. I know that in your presentations previously that you talk about one of the main tenets of Catholic social teaching, the universal destination of goods, which affirms the stewardship for all people, for the common good. And in Laudato Si, Francis, referring to this concept, he emphasizes the dignity of all human life, making it clear that our dignity as humans is not more for some and less for others. And you've said that fairness and equity suffer when the climate worsens. So could you say something about the disproportionate effects of the climate crisis?
Sure. I have to say first that I love this part of our teaching, the universal destination of goods, that we have this in our tradition, because it speaks to such a core issue, I think, in our society, in economy right now. It's truly countercultural to be about and have this core teaching of the universal destination of goods, that every single private property element has a social mortgage until all are thriving, until all are able to use their God-given skills to the fullest and be making that happy contribution. We still are each other's brothers and sisters. We owe this to each other. But more specifically about climate change, I mean, something that I've been concerned about for decades. I remember a talk, probably could be 15 or 20 years ago now, talking to the chief engineers of all of the states and their transport departments. And I was talking about heat in addition to, the pollution and of course, climate risk elements. And, heat was such a somewhat new consideration at that point, but I think that we underestimate just how large of an impact that has. And, we talk about keeping the temperature rise below 1.5 C, but of course that's the average, and it doesn't account for these, or it's the huge extremes are not so easily seen or considered, I guess, when we talk about that. And as we've seen this last year, 80% of the world has experienced this extreme heating, and the human body can only tolerate so much. And our window is not huge. 10 years ago or so, medical researchers were trying to figure out what was causing this huge epidemic in Central America of kidney disease. And they thought for sure that it must be an herbicide or something. And they started looking for that, but it ended up being heat and just the human body not being able to, really to adapt. We've thrived, this last 10 or 20,000 years in this kind of Goldilocks era of our climate. And human beings, of course, have been around 200 or 300,000 years. But at any rate, that the heating is really profoundly dangerous. And if anyone hasn't read like the first chapter of The Ministry of the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson, that one introductory chapter is such a good overview of that. Also the pollution, those less able to protect themselves with either air conditioning, lots of water breaks, shade, are also the most vulnerable to pollution, which is affecting all of us on this planet now. They've said something like 98 or 99% of people are affected by air pollution. And as a policy researcher, the cost effectiveness of getting rid of fossil fuel pollution just for the air pollution health effects was dramatic 20 years ago. In fact, what got me into that particular field was realizing that there was an avalanche of recent research showing how it was connected to every cell, every organ, mental health, physical health, emotional health, even the stock market. It affects the decisions people make that are so much further from anything they would expect. And it's impacting all of us, but the very worst for those, closest to cars and trucks and refineries.
This links in really, closely with my next question, which is, I'm interested in what you've said about climate homicide. You make the point that the systems we have, they don't take into account, like, for example, what you've just been talking about, deaths from fossil fuel pollution, and that the time is now to explore the potential for prosecution of reckless and negligent corporate acts. So are there grounds for optimism that, international efforts to make ecocide, the killing of one's home, an international crime, will that be successful? And And why is this a pressing issue?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I have seen, I think all of us have seen the failure to rise to the occasion and make the shifts that we need, especially the last 3 decades. And half of all of the pollution we have today has occurred in that period. So the culpability is gigantic, especially when you consider that governments have known, I can speak of my government, at least here in the United States, that in 1965, President Johnson had an all executive branch White House report on the risks of climate change. And, you know, the projections from that were pretty much right on. And the fossil fuel industry did digest and consider that. They had been having speakers addressing this since the 50s, the late 50s anyway. And in the 40s, in LA, doctors were noticing the extreme effects of pollution in terms of not just lung impacts, but cardio impacts. So by 1968, the API, the American Petroleum Organization, and all of their researchers, they had Stanford Institute researchers, had looked at I think it was about 200 pieces of the, literature at that point, and concluded that this was indeed happening. No other explanation for it. And so there was agreement. And even the auto industry, I read in a Time magazine issue devoted to this in 1967, but they were encouraging reporters to take rides, I guess, in their electric cars. So they were beginning to be on a good path working on this. But as we've all seen, the retrenchment, the taking of the cigarette industry's tactics of denying and delaying. Let's see how long we can delay action and maximize our profits. The very shortest term thinking in terms of the public good or obligations to each other as human beings, much less across species. They just kicked to the side of the road. Indeed, maybe the best example I can think of the throwaway culture that Pope Francis talks about. And I can't emphasize enough, this is life and death. This is life and death for people already. It's life and death, even so much more in the future. And I'm not an attorney, but I was delighted to see colleagues beginning to flesh out how climate homicide trials could happen.
Marie, you've talked about, and that was so illuminating, one of the main tenets of Catholic social teaching, the universal destination of goods. Can you please address another tenet of Catholic social teaching or Catholic concern, which is the right to life or the right to live?
Yes.
And I know you've made a very valid point that perhaps that focus is rather limited. And you've spoken about broadening this tenet, broadening this principle to include all species and equal rights for natural entities. You've talked about forests and rivers and glaciers, for example. And I wondered if you could please expand on this point. And you picking up something you've said earlier about Indigenous people who steward, I think you said 80% of biodiversity. It seems to me that Indigenous traditions have long provided us a kind of rights of nature framework and approach that shows us as human beings, we're just part of nature. We're not distinct from it. So second part of that question, perhaps, why then? Oh, why do we degrade and mistreat and deplete what we're part of? And are there signs of hope? And can this be turned around? So that question, and if I may, the related question about expanding the Catholic tenet, the right to life.
Wow, there's so much there. I do think that the tradition we have around valuing life and right to life has so much more that we could be doing. Cardinal Bernardin here in the United States talked about the seamless garment of all life and all times of life, and the importance of considering that. And that always made so much sense to me. Of course, the I guess pelvic focus almost that we've had with life and confining it to the 9 months of life before birth for so long. Again, it's similar to me to the climate change and cigarette PR strategy. Even if it wasn't intentionally a strategy, it by dominating the entire conversation, making it all about that, we're not living into our Catholic fulsomeness, the abundance we hear Jesus asking us to enter into and work for on earth as it is in heaven. So there's so much more to do there. And one of the great gifts at this point, and something that is so hopeful to me, despite the suffering that Indigenous peoples have been through, they have so much wisdom, right? They have spiritual traditions and learning of how to wisely care for and sustain the environment in their place, going back millennia, and even so much more than that. I mean, really, really far back. And that wisdom and knowledge, sometimes they call it traditional ecological knowledge, but it's a undivided knowledge. It's been pointed out that, we, in the Western society, you could say we've either been good at, but we've also experienced the harms of dividing things into very separate categories and then only focusing on those separate aspects and sometimes denying much of the rest. So, I have so much hope with the next generation. Not that I think any of us can expect them to do it, but at least since they are seeing things in a more integrated way and they're seeing how important this is. And you asked, how could we let it get to this point? And unfortunately, I think, we have to point to our capitalist extractive systems and underlying what we've done, in our Catholic Church. It was our church that gave the permission slips, basically, with the papal bulls and said, go out and take as much as you can, basically, and it's okay to enslave and torture. And just the impulse or desire to get more and more is the opposite of what Jesus talked about and tried to teach. So I think we can do so much better. It is such an open question how we surmount the terrible power of the fossil fuel interests and the most wealthy. They really have control of our political system in the United States, and I would say our church here too. So in some ways, one might say or think it couldn't be worse, especially at this late date in 2023. But there's the Spirit unbounded. That's what we have. We have faith in the Holy Spirit and God making things possible that seem to be impossible. And I most especially take so much hope. And the reason why I'm here with you today is the vision of Spirit Unbounded to connect our movements worldwide. And I think that desire is there by others. And hopefully it is is time. It seems like a Kairos moment. It seems like it couldn't get any later in our church. We don't have to wait 500 years to do the right thing and say Galileo is okay. Or, we can do it now, this time. And we need all of our heads, male and female. We have big challenges ahead. We can conclusively say that the way we have been doing things, and maybe as women patiently allowing and supporting for so long, this is not okay, and we need to do things differently. And that will be a joyful, good thing for us all, better and healthier for us all. And it is time.
I like that, a Kairos moment. Thank you so much for that. That's my takeaway. I mean, you're absolutely right. The fossil fuel industry in all our countries does appear to be so entrenched, doesn't it? However, as you say, the increasing number of people, young people, you reference young people, who are scrutinizing that, who are challenging it, who are asking questions, who are holding the industry and governments to account is incredibly encouraging. I think that has got to be part of the hope, hasn't it?
Yes. Well, they seem they seem to be less able, or it's not as easy for these powers to pull the wool over their eyes. So that gives me hope. And of course, they're great, invigorating, amazing partners in this work. I mean, I haven't heard much yet, like, how could you have allowed this on your watch, which I think in a way all of us do deserve to hear. But they're just wonderful, wonderful partners in this work.
Yes, and as we were saying, the Stop Ecocide campaign is now international and collaborative and cooperative. So are the other strands of ecological activism, which is great. Just if I may finally go back briefly to the science and then ask you a question about voices. And we were talking about the massive importance of listening, particularly to Indigenous voices. We've moved, haven't we, into the El Nino upswing, as it's called, with a period with ferocious heat spikes, demonstrating the warning that unless we act, and I think you used the word profoundly, faster and more profoundly, limiting the temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and I take your point that does, to a lesser or greater extent, ignore extremes of heat. That limit, just that limit alone, will slip beyond our grasp. This should be, as you've made very clear throughout this conversation, this should be a klaxon, going off in all our heads, governments included, demanding action. So my final question, Marie, is: are you optimistic that world leaders will listen to the voices of the Indigenous people, the scientists, the animals, the activists, and everyone else, and heed those warnings in time?
We have some of the oldest people in office in our Congress, and even record-breaking, I think, with that running for president this next year. And I certainly can't say if these folks will be converted to care for their grandchildren and everyone else and all life as much as we need them to be. But I certainly see the vigor and the getting public service of the younger folks. And I think what you're pointing to is we need every single person. It's not going to take every single person to get it over the finish line, but we never know how many and how much this is going to take. I would say we've had decades of utter failure. What gives me hope, Rhiannon, is that if we decided to do it, there's something very simple. If we stopped all public investment going to support anything fossil fueled, which is what we need at this point, we could have so much less of a crisis. We could have better health, a safer future, thriving really for all of us, so much less pollution. And we could have that now. But it's one of the most obvious things is that when you've got a hole you're in, stop digging. And we are still rapidly digging that hole. And that's what we see a lot of the direct action around, right? Like, we are going to stop this because we must stop this. And it is taking and going to take us being out in the streets and in stopping bowing down. And I was guilty of this too, thinking that just providing our input through the official processes, and that when it became profitable, we'd see this shift. But the system we have right now is so greedy. If they are getting, it seems like a buck more going one way, they want to go that way, no matter how harmful it is to people and life and our future. So we could do it. We've got all the technology. We've actually had all the technology we need to get into the high 90s percentile of clean energy and good life. But we need to make that shift. And boy, are the folks in office often so resistant.
Absolutely, that shift in values starts there, doesn't it? And you've said several times, I know in the past, Marie, that it is really time to act as if our home were on fire, because it is, isn't it? Thank you so much for those outstanding words, that great conversation, and the breadth of your knowledge and your understanding and your vision. For that, we thank you so much. And we are so pleased that you are part of this wider movement. Thank you so much.
And I'm delighted to let everybody know that we will be seeing you again in person when you join us on our social justice panel in Bristol on the 14th of October. So
it's been my pleasure.
That is not one to miss.
Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Have a good evening.
God bless.